Perfect. Erin Huck is in her office at Health in Common, and she will also be one of the presenters here today. So you get the benefit of hearing from 3 different people over the next little while. So today, again, I'd like to thank you just for taking the time to join us to participate in the webinar. The webinar is being hosted on the WebEx platform here at Manitoba Fitness Council, and will be posted up not on the WebEx site, but actually we will be downloading and uploading it to YouTube so that it's super easy to view kind of from here on. If you are super excited about this topic and would like to hear it again, or you can feel free to do that when we have it up and running. We will let you know. Audio is available in a couple different ways. You can use your computer and the speakers on your computer, or you can also call in. The unfortunate part about that is if you can't hear me, you also can't hear these directions. There is an on-screen chat on the right-hand side of the screen, so you can feel free to post questions there, and we will refer to them either during the webinar or at the end. Today's webinar will be available probably early next week. It does take a little bit of time to kind of download it and get it going again on the next platform. And so now I'm going to pass it off to Roy, and Roy is going to start us off here.
Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the purpose of the webinar. Today's webinar will be reviewing the results of the PACM review that occurred during late fall 2016. So we'll talk somewhat about the process used in the review, the participation in that, and the information that was gathered. And Erin will present that information that was done through Health in Common and compiled in a report to the PACM executive. The report itself is currently available on the PACM website under the Action Plan tab. So if you want to check out the whole report, you can certainly take a look at it there. The PACM executive has spent some time considering the information in the report and has developed some recommendations to the membership that will be presented today. The information provided today will provide the basis for further discussions that will take place at the AGM on May 16th. And the reason we're doing it this way was we wanted to get the information out to the membership prior to the meeting, give people a chance to hear the recommendations and give it some consideration. Then we can have further discussions about it at the AGM. And if people aren't able to participate in the webinar today, as Stephanie said, we'll be posting it so they'll have an opportunity before the AGM to take a look at that as well. So I'll just talk in general terms about the PACM review, a little bit about the purpose of the review. As I indicated, Health in Common was engaged to help develop the process and oversee the gathering and analysis of the information. And Health in Common has been working with PACM around the Manitoba Physical Activity Action Plan evaluation, and this fits into part of that evaluation, so it made a lot of sense for us to continue to work with Health in Common, and they've certainly been integral and key in terms of getting this information together. Erin Huck, as Stephanie had mentioned, will be getting into the details of the report. But I just wanted to kind of give a general sense of what the review was about. So the things that we were trying to look at was how PACM was doing in terms of the overall goal of supporting increased physical activity by Manitobans. We wanted to take a look at the manner in which PACM was operating. And we wanted to get ideas from our members and stakeholders on how PACM's approach might be improved. So those are the types of questions that we were seeking answers to. And I'm going to turn it over to Erin now, who can talk in more detail about the review process and the actual results of the review that took place. So I'll hand it over to Erin.
Great. I'm just going to open my screen up and get you guys on page with me. Thanks to everybody for spending some time in your meeting to let us walk through the findings. I'll just be speaking to the highlights. As Roy mentioned, it is posted online. I will talk today to some of the process of the evaluation, some findings, and they're organized in 4 areas. As well, then at the end, talk a little bit about some of the findings that also have come out of the current model review and the jurisdictional scan. Most of that, the input from the jurisdictional scan, informed discussions at the executive table, so I won't go into that into too much detail. And then a few minutes for questions around process and methodology. I want to say thanks, first of all, to everyone who took part in the evaluation, sharing your input and your ideas. And I'm going to jump right in. Stephanie, just a note, I have my full screen up, so if you have a question or interjection, just feel free to unmute yourself and jump in. So in terms of the process, as Roy said, we've been looking at the progress of PACM to support MPAP. We framed this work around 3 questions. To what extent has PACM been working to increase knowledge, capacity, and access to physical activity evidence and research among members? To what extent have you been working and promoting shared understanding and commitment to PACM and MPAP goals? So how do you as members share that understanding? As well as a survey of work done by the task groups. In terms of the evaluation, we also undertook, as I mentioned, a jurisdictional scan. And so not only looking at the opportunities and, as Roy put it, the manner in which you operate as PACM, we also spoke to 7 other jurisdictions. As you can see, some of these are focused on physical activity, while others have a broader health promotion focus, or even, for example, like Youth Agencies Alliance, just offer an example of coalition work in another sector. We talked to them with a standardized template and asked questions about their operational models, so their staffing, governance, revenue streams, activities, and areas of focus. So as I said, I won't be speaking directly to this, but these findings did serve as examples of emerging or best practice, and as well some of the success factors that we pulled out of there informed the executive discussions and provided directions for what was hashed through as a committee. In terms of who engaged with the evaluation, we had about 31 people complete the survey. We conducted 2 focus groups, as well as spoke to 7 key informants who had a longer history with PACM. As you can imagine, some of the limitations related to this include just the subjective perspectives of the stakeholders and knowing that we can always only speak to that which we know or understand about something. So if someone had limited knowledge about, for instance, the task groups, then that would often emerge in the findings. So they would speak to whether or not they knew about what was happening, and that may have been an issue with communication or just familiarity with the task groups, as an example. So in terms of the first question, increased knowledge and capacity, and to what extent PACM has increased that among members. As was shared earlier in a meeting, I think a couple months ago, many of you identified that engagement with PACM brings benefits. So that includes networking, staying abreast of sector developments, as well as opportunities to enhance sector knowledge, such as training or sharing of resources. In terms of this figure, quite a few of you, over half, felt that being a PACM member stakeholder enhances your knowledge about physical activity best practices and research. In addition to that, almost half of survey respondents say they use PACM resources and information. And similarly, half reported that they take advantage of the training or educational events that are offered. In terms of the resources that support that knowledge building, we've seen over the past couple of years that the number of your newsletter recipients has been growing. And Roy looked in to see whether or not those are just people jumping on and then a similar amount of people jumping off, but we've actually seen numbers of few unsubscribing, so leading to an overall growth in readers. In terms of your website, the use varies. There was some spikes in 2015, but generally you see about 100 users a month. And since 2015, you've had 6 webinars pulling in anywhere from 13 to 43 participants per webinar. So I think close to 400 people have participated in those in the past 2 years. Another area of question around increased knowledge and capacity was just around partnerships or collaborations. In terms of connecting PACM members to others, we heard that being part of PACM connects members to partners in support of physical activity efforts. So you're meeting with people who are working in your sector and sharing ideas. Over half of the survey respondents agreed that being a PACM member helps to connect them with partners in support of PA efforts. So you'll see it's interesting when we look at a lot of the findings, they're often split around 2/3, 1/3, or half to a half in terms of a positive response or a negative response. So as you see in front of you, 2/3 felt like they're connected. So there always is areas of improvement or opportunity to enhance an area of work as a PACM group. So for instance, most respondents said that being a PACM member or stakeholder does not increase their awareness of or access to funding or grants. So that's something people would imagine would be a benefit for the association or being a member of the association. Any questions, Stephanie? Have they popped up?
Nope, nothing yet.
Okay, great. So next section focused on to what degree do members or stakeholders have a shared understanding and commitment to PACM goals as well as the MPAP goals? So just commitment, who's engaging and taking part in activities. In terms of membership, you've seen a slight decline in the past 5 years. This is just one proxy, but the numbers of the coalition or voting members have slightly decreased, while the non-voting membership has increased. So if you think about the different cohorts within your membership, that has shifted a little bit. The number of non-voting government members has been fairly unchanged. In terms of engagement of these members and stakeholders, half of the survey respondents reported their level of engagement with PACM has been fairly constant. So that's the figure in front of you there. So 19 out of 30 saying they've either been constant or increased in terms of their engagement. Of those who responded to the question around their commitment of their organization to work as a coalition, this was a fairly strong response, probably one of the stronger ones within the survey, indicating their organizations were committed to working as a coalition to advance physical activity in Manitoba. So, and that was 11 to a great extent, 15 somewhat. Some of the barriers that folks identified in terms of fuller engagement included just things that are often out of control of individuals, such as the time that they have, funding, some resource constraints. But some other things that popped up included a lack of firm or measurable outcomes, a lack of data to show PACM's impact, and some commented that there was a failure to use members' time well. Across all respondent groups, so I'm speaking about survey, focus group respondents, and key informants, among those groups, many mentioned their concern that PACM is not having the desired impact. Yet overall, you'll see that there's, even on this screen, there's a large number of you who are committed to finding ways to work together and to advance, as a coalition, to advance physical activity. We also asked a question around how people felt PACM's progress was in regard to its mission around these three areas: collaboration, promotion, and education. For the most part, 2/3 of you thought you were doing pretty well in terms of collaboration and education. Less felt that you were making as much progress in the area of promotion. Now, the thing about that is some survey and focus respondents clarified that this promotion role really is to support those on the front line who deliver programming, and then also that promotion work entails supporting those on the front line and system level via advocacy and education. So not only working with the front line, but promoting their work via advocacy and education. So the third area, or third evaluation question, was really just a review of activity by your task groups. So I'll simply mention a few steps taken toward their identified action areas. In terms of forging innovative partnerships, the task group developed partnership profiles that highlight non-traditional partnerships that help to move physical activity promotion forward. The profiles and a resource listing for practitioners emerged from task group efforts to plan a partner symposium that was originally planned for 2016. And the task group has identified opportunities to partner on events and educational opportunities for members and stakeholders. So if you just think back to February, the partnership with the University of Manitoba seminar series. In terms of connecting people to physical activity, the task group conducted a jurisdictional scan of 8 jurisdictions in Manitoba and beyond, looking at how other organizations connect the general public to physical activity resources and information. They've also been looking at potential partnerships with key community development organizations and trying to explore mechanisms that can better inform Manitobans about physical activity opportunities, such as shared software platforms. Now, as I mentioned at the front end, a number of survey respondents could not speak knowledgeably to the work of the task groups, and they weren't sure about the progress of the groups. The last area of findings within the report relate to the current model, and I will highlight some of the successes as well as the opportunities for the current model that you're working within that you identified. So just to note, these opportunities are not presented as recommendations, but rather are a collection of ideas that emerge from the findings, and as such, some of them might not necessarily align with each other, but they are ideas brought forward by yourselves. As mentioned, key informant survey and task group respondents identified successes related to information sharing, building members' knowledge of sector developments, and connecting those among you who promote physical activity. Amid these successes and the fact that survey respondents indicated a commitment to working as a coalition to advance physical activity, many of you have called for greater action and progress toward clear, measurable goals, and expressed concern that PACM is not having its desired impact, as I mentioned. There is a described decline in membership numbers, diversity, and engagement, and some are concerned about those most connected to PACM are experiencing a level of fatigue due to over-engagement. So that leads us to some of the opportunities that you identified. One improvement highlighted is to clearly communicate the desired change and your scope of influence. So delineating what PACM is responsible for in the physical activity and broader health promotion sector, communicating that what PACM contributes to, but is not solely responsible for changing. So just simply, what you are okay with putting on your plate and what you're contributing to in terms of those broader changes at the system or community level around increases in physical activity across Manitoba. Related to this is defining an area of focus with tangible results, as discussed within the executive, as well as others within task group or key informant interviews. There's tensions, obviously, when you talk about identifying a set of narrow priorities that may exclude some of the organizational interests of some members. However, we heard from many that establishing clear priorities with tangible, measurable, shared results can encourage members to fully engage in coalition work, giving members, as someone said, something to bite into as independent agencies through PACM. Related to this as well, scope of influence and who are the levers for that, were discussions about who is PACM's audience. A number of respondents underscored that PACM's target audience is service providers, providing evidence-based training and resources to enhance the local leadership of recreation professionals. And for others, in addition, PACM can build awareness around PACM members and stakeholders about affecting population-level changes by addressing social, physical, and policy environments, with less focus on supporting promotion efforts geared to individuals. So this is about what is PACM's level of intervention at the individual or social system level. Another opportunity is simply about how you engage with members and or stakeholders, I guess, with the perceived decline in membership and engagement, as well as the diversity of sectors that are represented. Many of you spoke about broadening membership, engaging members from other sectors, working to positively impact health and well-being, so those who you see some alignment with, garnering support from a broader base of involved organizations, in one respect to help lessen member fatigue. Another area is just around partnerships. So understanding that PACM supports service providers or frontline. One respondent spoke about enhancing those partnerships with service providers who are already working with the population that you are trying to reach, such as newcomers and refugees, Indigenous populations, older adults, thinking with the idea to help extend PACM's reach. So providing training, information, and resources to service providers who are working with those populations. Another idea related to partnerships is just that ongoing outreach to aligning sectors, so piggybacking on relevant issues or events that align with the issues and interests of membership. And a few respondents indicated that making sure that you continue to maximize relationships with local and provincial government, recognizing this long-standing relationship is an organizational strength and asset and a further opportunity for PACM. There's interest to maintain your ongoing connections to emerging best practice and research. So not only continuing to share that knowledge with members and stakeholders, but also looking at frameworks that can help support decision-making that are evidence-based. So for instance, alignment with national strategies or broader models such as the social determinants of health. Also ensuring PACM contributes to its own body of knowledge and evidence can help it to demonstrate impact. So some of you spoke about establishing metrics that can help support monitoring and evaluation. And that can help members understand the progress that PACM is being made, as well as celebrate the milestones as they're being achieved. There's a perceived opportunity to build on the strengths of PACM and enhancing your role as an information and resource provider, strengthening the coalition's profile. This could include ongoing information sharing, as well as connecting with broader audiences through educational opportunities. So in some respects, some of these opportunities obviously are integrated, so broadening member engagement and strengthening profile and visibility, there's a lot of overlap too. Something else that folks spoke quite a bit about in terms of the current model is the practice of the rotating host organization every 2 years and how that may present challenges that contribute to a loss of institutional memory. So administrative challenges, as well as a disjointed lack of continuity or loss of momentum that can slow the progress of both the task groups and broader PACM goals. So with this in mind, there's an opportunity to revisit this practice and to strengthen knowledge transfer. A handful of respondents said the executive committee could potentially be further diversified and perhaps help address the little turnover that some have perceived within the committee. A small number also called for greater leadership to set priorities and focus the work of the coalition. There are also some opportunities within those governance tools and processes. So for instance, revisiting some of the committee terms of reference, as well as some of those detailed work plans. And I think that also has to do with, actually, you know what, no, hold off, there's something that relates to a point later. So those are the key questions that we addressed within the evaluation. I'm just going to touch briefly on the jurisdictional scan. Before I do, I'm just going to check in with Stephanie. Anything, Stephanie, in terms of clarification or comments?
I think we're good at this point.
Okay, is everybody still awake? Type in if you are. Okay, in terms of jurisdictional scan, so as I mentioned, we looked at 7 jurisdictions, and across those we used a standardized template and asked them about their activities, how they're governed, their structure, and there were a number of things that emerged that they either identified as successful practice or seemed consistent across the various models, and that's how I'll describe them. And those are the top bullets, the top 5. For many, they spoke about being sure about how they are attempting to achieve their outcomes, so their theory of change. They described the intended impact and the steps to achieve their identified outcomes as well. And many talked about clarifying the area of influence or intended contribution, so always providing a rationale for the strategies that they take and allowing for the resources they're using to be justified. There's also, folks talked about defining an area of focus, so that could even be around an identified target population or thematic area of focus, such as physical literacy. Many spoke about establishing shared vision and measurement and shared indicators, which provides a focus for diverse stakeholders. And a number, of course, spoke about nurturing multi-sectoral partnerships, and often you would see that as evidenced through the representation of the boards and the different levels of the committee, so voting and non-voting board members and different committees, and an ongoing evidence-informed knowledge base, so ongoing research and attention to developing the knowledge base of health promotion, which provided a base both for advocacy as well as information sharing among members. Some of the things that, now those top 5, I really felt like emerged through the opportunities that were identified by respondents among yourselves. And there's a few other things too that came out that perhaps weren't articulated as clearly by PACM members and stakeholders. And one is just this idea of establishing dedicated support, so core funding and dedicated staff. You know, there's, I think, probably a high awareness of a shift in terms of government and the closeness that we're looking at resources right now, so perhaps that's why people shied away from, you know, talking too much about this, establishing dedicated support. But what we saw within the models, and I'm just jumping to the last bullet, delineating operations and governance, that many of them spoke about splitting that and having a clear delineation between the staff person or persons and the board. And one of you also picked up on that as a PACM respondent, saying, you know, we really have to be clear that when we're talking about policy, we have people at the table who are familiar with policy and who are working on that, and their organizations have interest in that. And then there's also sort of a program professionalization area, so that people who are focused on building the knowledge and capacity of service providers. So there's a few among you who are also thinking about this separation between operations and governance. And the last thing is just being a voice of the sector. So a few of the models talked about that they would be recognized as the voice of the sector, the go-to for physical activity promotion within their region. And they talked about this as being an aid to enhance the organization's profile with internal and external stakeholders, and always communicating the value and impact of the collective by virtue of their activity externally. And that is it. Questions or comments?
You.
I guess, I mean, a really simple question is there any surprises for anybody in terms of what they heard?
We are not looking like we're getting a lot of questions right now.
Okay, I'll sign off. I'll just mute myself. Thanks, everybody.
Excellent. So first and foremost, I'd like to thank Erin for being a part of this process, and I know Health and Common did a lot of work kind of getting us ready for this webinar today, and even for PACM kind of getting ready to kind of go through this process. So I'd like to thank everyone who participated and provided input to review through the various mechanisms provided. So those of you that were called or came into meetings and, or responded to online surveys. There were a lot of thoughtful ideas and opportunities brought forward for consideration, certainly beyond what the executive would have identified on their own. The PACM executive took the results from the review as presented in the report from Health and Common and had several conversations to identify common thoughts and themes that were running through the information. As you can see from what she has provided, there were there was a lot of information that kind of came out of this. So PACM did take some time to kind of sort through it before we brought it to you here today. The executive recognizes that there are varying levels of involvement and background from the respondents who participated in the data collection. We recognize that there is value in the work that has been done through the updating of the MPAP, Manitoba Physical Activity Action Plan, and the work of the task groups that were formed through the process. We further recognize the capacity has to be considered in terms of PACM's financial resources, host organization, coordinator support, volunteer involvement on the executive and on the task groups. The executive has used all this to formulate some recommendations that we believe are achievable to move forward as an organization. The 3 areas of focus that have emerged from the review are the PACM model, so that would be the coalition structure, operations, scope, and feasibility. The governance and membership, So that would be governance, membership, and partners. The key activities, communication, and knowledge sharing, and healthy public policy. And now I will go into a little bit more detail in each one of these areas. So first, the host organization. So maintaining the Manitoba Fitness Council as the PACM host organization, at least initially, will provide some ongoing consistency and stability for PACM. Structuring of two distinct areas of operational focus and audiences. So we have communication and knowledge sharing, and policy and advocacy. We'll now provide you with some proposed approaches to the PACM model. Consider alternate operating models to reflect dedicated resource capacity and the ability and willingness of membership to support with active participation. Explore application of collective impact approaches within areas of focus. The shared interests of the critical sectors in promoting physical activity provides an opportunity to jointly develop a plan and seek financial supports. Governance and membership. Including the following specifics: strengthening PACM executive with additional diverse representation from the sector and allied sectors, targeting people at the leadership and decision-making level of organizations to bring their influence, contacts, and networks to PACM, broadening PACM members and stakeholder representation from allied sectors as a means to influence others in the field. So this is all stuff that we've heard kind of already, but just making it just a little bit more real from the PACM perspective. Identifying individuals and organizations for involvement related to specific prioritized activities. Now, the PACM's proposed approach to governance and membership. PACM's work reflects the key role of primary prevention and upstream interventions on health issues and recognizes the importance of ongoing communication with and involvement of a wide range of stakeholder organizations. Continuing to share physical activity-related information through communications, newsletter, website, webinars, and networking opportunities. Continuing to provide networking and relevant training opportunities, engaging members, stakeholders, and partners in content development. Expanding access to PACM resources and information sharing via new web-based technology and archiving of materials to reach a broader and rural audience. Ongoing representation of a sector on relevant provincial and national initiatives. So our proposed approach to the key activities: clarify PACM's target audience, that being service providers primarily. Reflect elements of connecting people to physical activity task group work via ongoing communication and knowledge sharing. Communicate PACM's connection to broader outcomes, so MPAP and current activity in the sector. Key activities for healthy public policy. Public policy, advocate for legislation requiring daily physical activity in schools and mandatory physical activity in daycares. Public policy number 2, connect and collaborate with other agencies and existing local, provincial, or national initiatives to address equitable access. Proposed approach to the healthy public policy key activities. Embed forging innovative partnerships within areas of policy work and communication and knowledge sharing. Identify and focus on specific actions within goals. Engage PACM members and stakeholders to prioritize potential goal focus. Identified by the executive and MPAP consultants on MPAP, the PACM review, healthy public policy, and innovative partnerships. Concentrate related expertise and effort to successful completion of that goal rather than pursuing several goals that may not be resourced adequately. Update task group and emerging committee work plans, including terms of reference, clarified measures, and outcomes. You may have noted in the previous slide that we identified the public policy areas as being potential areas of focus. These are 2 policy areas that were identified through the deliberations at the Healthy Public Policy session that we held in December of 2015 and the prioritization session that occurred in February of 2016. These survey results are available on the PACM website under the Resources tab, Healthy Public Policy. They are listed here in order that they are prioritized through that process. One of the notions that came out of the PACM review is that PACM is more effective when it focuses its efforts. the executive believes that given our capacity, that is the direction that we should go in. To that end, we are proposing that the major focus of PACM become one of these policy areas. The other key activities and approaches discussed here would still occur, but moving forward, we would look to pull together a working group to focus on one of these policy areas as our major focus. Along with other recommendations reviewed, this is something that we would be the focus of the additional discussion at the AGM that is currently scheduled for May 16th. Hopefully you've registered for that already. So to help clarify any of the information presented, we wanted to have an opportunity to go through some questions if you have any, and let's just see where we can kind of go from here. So if you have a question and you haven't used the chat box yet, if you would like to add a question, that would be great, and we'll take it from here.
So we've run through the recommendations fairly quickly. I think that what the executive has tried to do is take a look at what came out of the review and the recommendations that have been put forward in terms of moving forward. For the most part, we believe reflect, some of the common and I guess most prominent messages that we saw coming out of the review information. And one of the things that we heard quite a bit, saw quite a bit in the responses, was that it appeared that PACM was more effective when it was more focused. So people that have been around for several years can think back to when PACM was involved with the work around active transportation, and there were several things that came out of that. Some resources, a session out in Portage around planning around active transportation. The coordinator, the PACM coordinator at that time, Anders, was very much interested and involved with the active transportation, and did a lot of work on behalf of PACM with communities around the province. And that came up several times as an example of some focused work that PACM did that people felt was more effective. One of the other messages I think we heard was that when we looked at the areas of focus, the communication, some of the work that was being done through the task groups, one of the areas that was identified as seeming to be quite important for the respondents is around policy, and policy was seen as something that was, well, you could focus on an area with policy. It set the stage for other things to happen. And so that's, again, part of the response that the executive has is making that recommendation about focusing on a policy, a public policy area, as the major focus for PACM moving forward. So I just wanted to provide a little more background in terms of connecting what these recommendations were saying and how that, we believe, reflects what the response and the information that was provided through the PACM review.
One of the other things that kind of tends to happen is that when you have a focus such as something like active transportation, it brings different partners to the table. And so when we look at some of these potential focuses, we can see that there are some people that would be missing around the table in order to do a good job of working on this policy area. So when we look at diversity and things like that, we will probably have a better time being able to attract some of those more diverse groups if we have something very targeted that they would be a part of. So I think we're kind of getting to the end here, Roy. What do you think?
Yeah, unless there's questions that people have, anything that you need further clarification on. The intent is not to review or to go over this all again at the AGM. The intent is really to give further opportunities for questions. We'll probably do a brief presentation on the recommendations that are here, not as much of the extensive background as provided today, but then to have a conversation at the AGM with the participants around those recommendations to ensure that that is the direction that the group is interested in going, and then to work through a little bit of an exercise to determine if we are going to move in that more focus on public policy, then doing a little bit of work around identifying which of those two areas that had previously been identified would be the focus of policy for PACM. So that's a little bit of what we see coming up through the AGM process.
So I think that pretty much wraps it up for today. So the webinar will be recorded and posted on the PACM website, and Roy will be sure and send you an email when that's available in case you want to, take it home and watch it over again. In addition, we will also send out a link. So we will send a link to the people that were registered as well as other people that weren't able to attend today. The AGM will be held on May 16th from 10:30 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Norwood. A light lunch will be provided. And if you have not registered, please go online through the PACM website to register. In addition to the AGM business, we will be continuing the discussion on those next steps, as Roy has just kind of talked about. And again, thank you so much for participating today in the webinar, and we definitely appreciate your input and your feedback. We really couldn't have done this, self-reflection for the organization without having all those opportunities and people that shared their thoughts. Thank you. Big thank you to Erin from Health and Common for strong support through the PACM review process and for presenting today. I'm going to pass an imaginary gift your way, Erin. Receive it, and the real gift will come later. Thank you so much, and take care.